Okay, great. Okay, hello everybody. In case you don't know who I am Alex Murray. I'm a recent graduate from Cambridge. I've been tabbing for about 3 years, and in that time I've been tab master of Euros, I've been on the tab teams for Euros, Worlds, I've been in charge of Oxford, Cambridge, LSE, North American Championships, a bunch of stuff. So yeah, so I'm going to talk through what tabbing is like, the skill set that I think makes you good at it, some of the technical aspects you should know about, briefly discuss common problems, and then I'll talk to you about how to get involved in case you are interested, which I hope you are. But before I do that, just why I think tabbing is important. I think it's just genuinely really fun. You get to travel for free, which you don't get to do if you're a debater normally, so it's a pretty good deal. And you learn a lot of skills that you can talk about in job applications. Plus, people always need tab people. So it's quite easy to get involved if you are like medium good at it. So yeah, I would definitely recommend if you're at all interested. Great. Okay, so the job responsibilities of tabbing, essentially you just have to process data really quickly and really accurately. So, you know, it's tabulation. You've got to produce the tabs at the end of the tournament. You've got to produce the draws for each rounds. Along with that, there's a lot of logistics that you have to handle in order to make sure that you're able to process data accurately and quickly. So this is mostly people management and making sure other people are doing their jobs correctly, but it also, of course, includes logistics like working out how registration will work, working out the setup of the whole event, the schedule, like how the draw will work, how ballots will work, that kind of stuff. And I also think, and I hope other tabby will agree, that your responsibility as a tab director is also to make sure that people can enjoy the tournament insofar as possible. So for example, only introducing like rules that are necessary to try to make sure people can have as much fun as possible and get a lot out of debating, because that's kind of what it's all about. So in order to be good at tabbing, one sec. Why isn't this? Why? I think it's frozen. Okay, yeah, great. So the skill set you need to be good at tabbing is a lot about people skills. So a common misconception about tabbing is that it's mostly like computer science and maths, which is actually why I got involved, because I was good at maths, so I thought I'd be good at it. But it's actually just much more about management, managing people. You know, you're going to be working with a lot of different teams, from, you know, runners to the participants to the CAs to the staff at university venues. So you need to be able to interact in a good way with all those people. You need to be a good team player because you spend a lot of time reporting to other people, and you also need to be able to lead teams yourself if you get good at it. It's a lot about problem solving, so different things come up in every competition, but you need to be able to keep your head calm under pressure. Yeah, think quickly, but think carefully and find the best solution. If you panic when you're in pressure, this is probably not the role that will be best for you, because the schedules are so tight, there's inherently some pressure involved in tabbing, but also things will inevitably go wrong. You know, like there will be moments where you're like, oh no, we've lost all the tab, and you need to be able to think carefully and fix that. You also need to be able to keep things confidential. So obviously a lot of what you do with tabbing means keeping results and feedback careful and that kind of things, but you also have access to everybody's clash list and stuff like that. So it's really important that you are able to keep that to yourself, because otherwise it's a massive betrayal of trust. And you obviously won't succeed if you're not able to do that. And finally, technical skills. I genuinely think this is the least important thing on the list. And when I was talking to my group of tab people that I work with, they all agreed earlier. It's important for large competitions that you have one person on the team who's quite good at tech, but it is not important that everybody is good at tech. I myself studied politics. The woman who taught me studied like PPE. There are specific technical things you need to be able to do to tab, but whoever teaches you will teach you how to do those specific technical things. You don't need to be able to code or anything unless you want to do other projects, which is obviously an added bonus, but it's not at all essential in order to tab. So, oh, it's frozen again, great. Okay, so I'm just going to really quickly show you some of how TabDirector works. Obviously, I can't tell you everything that you'll need to be able to do on TabDirector, but I'm going to try to give you an overview. There's also comprehensive docs for TabDirector, which is really useful. So you can revert back to those if you ever have any issues. There's also a support group of people who've run into issues with TabDirector. And if you ever reach out to someone who has tabbing experience, I'm sure they'll be able to help you if you run into any issues. But in short, so the first thing you need to do is you need to set up the tournament using a Heroku app account. Again, there's extensive documentation on how to do this. You then need to import teams, speakers, judges, feedback, clash, venues, that kind of stuff. TabDirector's user interface is generally very good. So for example, this is what importing teams looks like. It's pretty straightforward. You then need to set availability. You can either do this manually, which you would normally do at smaller competitions, or you can create codes for people and do it with barcodes or by manually entering the codes, which is useful at larger competitions. And then you set up the CAs so that they can create the panels for each round. The interface for that looks like this. So there's lots of different things you can do within this interface. Yeah, I have ripped all these screenshots from an actual competition, but obviously I've covered up the confidential bits. But so you can see clashes, obviously it will flag up. It will flag up if people have been near each other. It will flag up which panels are likely to get rolled. There's separate boxes for chairs, wings, and trainees. One cool thing you can do is pre-formed panels. So if you're at a decent sized competition, like maybe 15 to 20 rooms or higher, then you probably want people to make pre-formed panels during the rounds. So you can set up the CAs for pre-formed panels. They won't know which teams are doing it. Okay. So yeah, they can create the panels, and then obviously that saves loads of time between the rounds because TabDirector will just copy and paste the pre-existing panels onto the actual panels for you. So at competitions like Euros, you'll definitely want to be doing that. But also if you're doing something like LSE Open, you should probably be doing that as well. Then you will probably have to be using the database for pretty much any tournament. For example, to set up feedback or to enter clash, you need to use the database. But luckily, TabDirector has a really straightforward database, so you don't need any like coding knowledge or anything like that to be able to use it. It looks roughly like this. It's pretty simple. Whatever you want to change, whether that's a score, a panel, a feedback, adding rounds, changing round silence, that kind of stuff, you just scroll and then it's very easy to change. And for example, this is what the feedback interface looks like. As you can see, it's pretty straightforward. You can then change each question and edit the settings for each of them. You also need to remember to send everybody their private URLs, which you can do using mail merge and SendGrid. Again, there's documentation on how to do this. And remember to set up clash, feedback, and make sure you have the right features silent. So for example, you don't want to be showing the team tab and speaker tab until after the competition, and you don't want silent rounds to be shown, obviously. So online competitions, this is pretty straightforward. Online competitions are in some ways more straightforward than traditional competitions, and in other ways they're obviously a bit more difficult. So there's a whole bunch of different softwares you can use. There's Zoom Kitty, Yardley, Mixodia. I don't know if I'm saying Yardley right, but I haven't used any of these myself, so I can't testify, but lots of other people have. So if you're interested in them, just reach out and I'm sure they'll be very happy to talk you through the pros and cons. There's also Discord bots people have been writing, which are very good. You don't need them. I think it's possible to do stuff like check-in manually for smaller competitions, but obviously at the larger end of competitions, so for things like Euros or Oxford IV, you probably want some kind of bot to stop there from being a massive amount of manual labor. In terms of timings, if you're creating the schedule for an online competition, you should allow more time for each round because there's a higher possibility of things going wrong, and there's quite a lot of like faff time with people disconnecting or people not joining the right Zoom call and that kind of thing. But the days overall, you can cut out quite a lot of time from the general day. So for example, people don't need to queue up for lunch because they're in their own homes, and they don't need to travel between venues and accommodation. So even if you add extra time to each round and pad them, the overall timing of the day should still be roughly similar. And one really important thing for online competitions is that it's really important that you get multiple ballots for each room. So ideally a ballot from every judge, maybe not trainees because they're kind of unreliable and often don't know how to fill in ballots because they haven't done it before. This is really important. At Euros, we found that ballot sets had an about 40% failure rate, so that there were discrepancies between different judges' ballots. So if we'd been relying on just one judge's ballot, obviously we would have had so many errors in our data. So normally you would have a paper ballot and an e-ballot. Luckily with TabDirector, if you play with the settings and again in the database, it's quite easy to make sure that every judge submits their own e-ballot. I actually think I would probably recommend doing this at in-person competitions and maybe doing away with paper ballots altogether, because for the tab end, it becomes very straightforward if you don't have to enter any data yourself. But obviously that's up to you, and I think we're probably a little way off having in-person competitions anyway, so that's kind of a discussion for 6 months, a year's time. So here I was going to talk about common problems, but when I sat down to try and create a list of common problems, I realized that actually the problems that you face in tabbing are so varied and often don't repeat. Then the one thing I would say is that they're mostly not very technical. Technical problems are maybe like 10 to 15% of the ones you come up against. It's normally logistics, and it's also normally people. So people being too slow, people getting lost, like the CAs and the conveners or equity not doing their jobs entirely well. One of the things about tabbing that I didn't realize when I started is that as tab master, you're normally one of, if not the most experienced person behind the scenes of a competition, because a medium good tab master can easily do like 20 to 30 competitions a year, but most people will convene once or twice in their life, and CAs will do, I don't know, like 5 competitions a year normally, maybe 10 if they're really good. So if you're tabbing, expect to help out with other issues like sometimes, you know, equity problems or general logistics, or like that the food isn't there, because you'll often be very experienced, you'll have seen these kind of issues before. And also if you're good at problem solving, then you can use those skills to try and help the competition run smoothly in general. I think the difference between an okay tournament and a really well-run tournament is often if you're willing to step up and do the kind of less technical aspects and maybe less traditionally tab aspects. It's frozen again. Great, so in terms of if you're interested in tabbing and you're interested in getting involved, the main thing I would recommend is to reach out to people who already tab, because then they can show you the ropes. It's much easier than having to learn it all by yourself from scratch. And they will be able to give you advice, even if they can't be with you for the tournament. So in the past, I've had people during their first tournament, we've agreed that I'll be like accessible by phone all day. So then if there are problems, they know someone's there to help out. You can shadow them at tournaments. Often that's a really good way to get involved and like at large competitions, and see how it works on a larger scale, which makes it much easier to run on a smaller scale. And also, as I mentioned earlier, there is generally a shortage of tab people. So if you just put your name out there as someone who's interested, then when more experienced people turn down competitions they aren't able to do, they can recommend you. And that's a really good way of getting involved. Another thing I would say is, this probably is quite intuitive, but if you do ever get an opportunity to do internationals, I would really recommend that you take that, and that when internationals are asking people to join the team, if you're interested, you should 100% apply, because people in different countries and in different circuits and continents all tab super differently. And it's an amazing learning experience to figure out, you know, to be like, okay, well, what does the Asian circuit do that we should bring back to Europe? So if you do get that opportunity, I would really recommend it. You should also join the Facebook group How Long to the Draw, which is where tab people talk about nerdy things. And if you write there that you're interested, that can be a good way to reach out to people and get more opportunities. You should also take advantage of your society, whether that's doing small internals or, so, you know, just like tabbing a little practice round just for your society in the evening, or if they're running like an IV or a schools competition, then they can either make you tab master if you have a little bit of experience, or put you on the team, because obviously it's in their interest to train you up. Similarly, I didn't do this, but I would recommend reaching out to local competitions and societies, especially if you're local and maybe willing to fund yourself. And if you have any experience, even better, then I'm sure people will take you up. And then before you do your first tournament, I would say it's really important, I was going to say this earlier, but I forgot, to think through every aspect of the competition. And that's the main way that you make sure it runs really smoothly. So think through things like, okay, how is it going to work when we do registration? How are we going to project? How is it going to work when we collect ballots and process them? How long do I have for each stage of that process? How long do the CAs have to do panels? How long am I going to tell them they have to do panels? That kind of stuff. And if you think through those kind of things in advance, it takes a bit of time at first, but obviously you get used to it quite quickly. And then hopefully your competitions will run really smoothly and you'll get invited back to do more things. Okay, does anyone have any questions? That was my cat. He's saying he does not have any questions. Okay, great. Well, if you do, please reach out and contact us. My name is Alex Murray on Facebook. Also, I am always super keen to hear from people who are interested in tabbing and take them along to competitions.
Alex, there are questions in the chat.
Oh, sorry. Oh yeah, and to finish what I was saying, I'm also really keen in particular to train female and non-binary tab people. So if that's you, please, please, please do get in touch. In the Zoom chat, Matt, or in Facebook?
Zoom.
Okay, so firstly, on the second part of that, on optimum time per round, it massively varies on a bunch of factors. For example, you need to agree with the CAs and conveners how long judges are going to have to deliberate, how long judges are going to have to give their adjudication. It also depends on the size and if there's any issues. So for example, Cambridge IV is often spread out over 8 buildings, which are 10 minutes walk apart. So you obviously have to factor in a bit more time for that. I would say in the best possible world where you only have 10 minutes, maybe even to adjudicate, and it's a very small competition in one building, 1 hour 30 for rounds is fine. And also, obviously, it depends if it's 5 or 7 minute speeches, so it's different for school competitions. At the Oxford IV, we have 2 hours 15 for rounds, and at Euros, we normally have 3 hours. So kind of adjust accordingly, but if you're not sure, I would say to pad it quite generously, because it's generally much better if people unexpectedly get home a little bit earlier than if you're running late and everyone's missing their trains. Obviously, that's much worse. Also, we tend to add 8 to 15 minutes for just time for speakers being annoying and not being in their rooms and that kind of stuff. And that time is always taken. So definitely when you're doing the maths of how long debate takes, remember to add a solid 10, 15 minutes spare, because debaters are many things, but organized is not one. Great. On the first part of that question, unexpected delays just really do vary. I guess one thing you can do is think through in advance, how long, when is the latest that teams can turn up and you'll wait for them, because you don't want to just be waiting for teams or judges or CAs in some cases for an hour and delaying the whole competition. So even if you say Reg shuts in 9, you should have in your head and agreed with your team that okay, secretly 9:15 is the real cutoff point after which we can't add anybody to the draw. And that will probably cut down on unexpected delays. Other than that, the biggest long delays that have ever happened have been technological issues, but those are quite hard to foresee. The only real way to fix it is to just be very detail oriented and try to make sure you don't miss, miss a stage in the process or anything like that. Oh, sorry. Question 2, what software is easiest to learn on, and is there any advantage, disadvantage to them? This is quite a controversial question. I think the general consensus among tab people is that TabbyCat and Tabby2 are both great. TabbyCat is specifically much better for online competitions. So if, at the moment, I would definitely recommend TabbyCat, and it's probably more beginner friendly. I also really like Tabby2. It's the software I learned, and it's the software I'm most familiar with. But realistically, either is fine. TabbyCat has the advantage of being much more user friendly. Tab E2, in my opinion, the main advantages are that all the competitions are located centrally, so you don't have to know the specific link for a competition. You can just search, and people have the same accounts from competition to competition, so they don't have to like re-enter Clash and emails and all of that. And also, I'd say the disadvantage of TabbyCat is that if you're not paying to pump up the database, then it crashes like a few days into the month, so you can only view the tab quite rarely for big competitions, which is obviously unideal, but it is much more user-friendly. So I'm not trying to shit on it. They're both fine. I'm using TabbyCat at the moment. Probably if you're starting out, it will depend which the person who's teaching you uses, because obviously, yeah, that makes sense. Question 3, why do you like tabbing? Would recommend it as something to get into? On a very materialistic sense, I really like free trips, which I have got more than anybody should get through tabbing. It's really great, but also I find it a form of, I like being able to control things and it being my fault if stuff goes wrong, whereas with debating, even if I debate as well as I can, I'm still like often not going to do that well. You can't always control doing really well, whereas in tabbing, if you plan advance, then great, it goes great. It's also just very fun. I like working with small teams that I become very close to. I think that's been really fun. So yeah, I mean, try it out, see if you like it, because obviously everyone has different reasons for liking it. Question 4, what was the most surprising thing during tabbing that you didn't expect in advance? I really did think it was going to be about maths and like how quickly I could add speaker scores, and that was none of it. I think kind of for question 3 and question 4, I've been tabbing since I was 17 and I'm now 21, and it has made me so much more confident than I think I would be otherwise. Like, I think the ability to stand up in a room of like 400 people and just like address them and tell them information they need and tell them what to do often is a really useful skill set, and definitely makes me more confident in every aspect of life. So I'd really recommend it. Question 5, what can the community all do to get more non-male tabbers? I think a big part of it is portraying tabbing as something that's more accessible, but also like obviously active outreach is really great. So for Madrid EUDC, we've agreed that half the team will be non-male. If you are ever in a position to be picking teams, I think you should do similar things. If you actively say when you're recruiting for people, we are really looking for women and non-binary people, then you are much more likely to get those applicants. Also following up, so I often have people come up to me at tournaments and say they're interested in tabbing, and if I make a point of following up with them, then obviously they're much more likely to get involved. So yeah, if you're in a position as a convener or as head of a society to pick your tab team, try not to make it all male, please. Yeah, okay, thank you. If you have any questions, feel free to message me on Facebook or elsewhere. Okay, thanks so much.